They'll be let in as the meeting goes. Is that correct?
Andrew, they'll just pop on because it's everyone can pass through the lobby.
Okay, I see. Okay. All right. So I guess I'll just call the meeting to order. And I had an agenda, but it was fairly light. Yeah, so we'll call the meeting to order. And just before we start, I'll just do the land acknowledgement again. I would like to begin by acknowledging the land on which we gather is a traditional unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq peoples. This territory is covered by the treaties of peace and friendship, which Mi'kmaq peoples first signed with the British Crown in 1725. The treaties did not deal with surrender of lands and resources, but in fact, recognized Mi'kmaq title and established the rules for what was to be an ongoing relationship between nations. We, the members of this committee of council and town staff assisting us this evening, pay respect to the elders past and present and descendants of this land. We honor the knowledge keepers and seek their guidance as we strive to develop closer relationships with the Indigenous peoples in New Brunswick. And I also just wanted to take a quick minute to acknowledge what's going on in the Ukraine right now. I figure we might as well, I thought I'd bring this up now rather than us wait for a council meeting to bring it up, which I'm sure the mayor will probably say something about that. But in the early morning, Russian troops led an illegal attack on the nation of Ukraine, as I'm sure everybody knows. Already many people have died and many more have been displaced. So I just wanted to take a moment to send my thoughts and prayers to the people of Ukraine and to Ukraine Canadians who are enduring such hardship, heartache, and peril. So just to set the rules again, if possible, just keep muted and then turn your mics on when you want to speak. You can wave at me if I can see you, or put your hand up to speak. That would be great. So I'll just give a brief rundown of our last meeting. So the Municipal Reform Committee of Council last met on February 9th at 6 p.m. We had a briefing of the previous meeting and then looked to have a discussion on the composition of the future council of Entity 40. After the chair gave a breakdown with pros and cons of an at-large versus ward system. This was in anticipation of the advisory committee meeting, which was held with the provincial facilitator, which was held on February 15th. There was an ask for suggestions on these topics, and a couple of councillors, as well as one citizen and former deputy mayor, shared their thoughts. And that's pretty much it for what we discussed. I mean, there was obviously discussion back and forth, but that was pretty much what we discussed. We had an open period for questions, but that was pretty much the extent of our meeting last time. I will go on to talk about a couple other things, but we can pause here for a minute if there's any questions. Okay. On February 15th, after an hour and a half, a decision was made by consensus to have 4 councillors elected by wards for the current LSD areas, 1 for Point de Butte, 1 for Dorchester LSD, 1 for Sackville LSD South, running all the way to Rockport and around, and 1 for Sackville LSD North, which includes Midget and bumps against the boundaries of Beaubassin East. Sackville will have 4 seats as well, which currently are on the map divided into 4 wards currently. That map that you all have seen, which is shared on the Town of Sackville website. This is the conversation that we were looking to have tonight to bring back to the advisory committee and council. But we're gonna, so whatever we talk about tonight, Sean and I will bring back to the advisory committee meeting, which our next one will be held on March 3rd. So the question is, do we want 4 wards, 3 wards, 2 wards, 1 ward? Do we want to have Sackville just being 1 ward? So we would have 4 councillors voted at large. There's a possibility to have it as 2 wards and have 2 councillors from each. The boundaries that are sort of tentatively put on the map right now could be divided into three. We could have a counselor for two counselors from one from one from one. So I guess that's what we're looking for advice on this evening. Thoughts? Allison, you had your hand up first. Go ahead.
Thank you. So I think that it might be too late for this because it's already been decided there will only be 4 counselors representing 6,000 Sackvillians plus Mount Allison students and 4 counselors representing the other 2,000 people. Is that correct?
Yes.
Or is there still a chance of that being changed, seeing as it's such a skew as far as population goes?
No. So yes, that has been decided. That counts, that meeting that we had on the 15th, whatever decision was made at the end of that night with the advisory committee that was there. That decision was final, and Mr. Peters took that that recommendation to the province, and then they started drawing up possible wards to bring back to the next meeting we had.
Right. Okay. Well, at the risk of sounding really, really jaded, it probably doesn't matter what I think should happen with the 4 counselors representing the 7,000 people, because I'm starting to feel like it doesn't matter what we think. Sorry. Try to be more positive.
One more thing, the Mount A student numbers were not included in the electors, of course. The elector numbers that you see on that map are from the 2021 elections New Brunswick numbers. The population that was also used for discussion was the 2021 census numbers. And so Mount Allison, of course, as in previous years, was not included in that. Bill, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, that's when we did the changing of the riding associate, or whatever you call the electoral district, and joined with Member Cook. They didn't count the students then either, and it's kind of ironic because what they used to justify that is that they're not on the list, and yet when they register, hundreds of university students registered. Why are they not on the electoral list? It's criminal that they don't do that, because they use what happened in the past to justify what they do each year. And each year, hundreds of students vote, and over 1,000 are eligible to vote. And yet they refuse to do it, and they refuse to correct it. So that's a huge problem. But an equally, well, I'll just say, I'm really disappointed that our representatives agreed to I mean, according to the report, the mayor sent a report around, and what you said, this is what the consensus of the group was, to forward the fact that more than 2/3 of the population of the entity gets half the seats, and fewer than 1/3 gets half the seats. And not only that, not only is it by population, but the vast majority of the assets of the entity and the tax base are in Sackville. And so we are hugely underrepresented, and it violates the provincial guidelines by orders of magnitude. It's 3 times off. I mean, it's just, anyway, as Allison said, it's, there's no right way to do the wrong thing, and we're well on the road to doing the wrong thing. But it just, I would very much like to have been wrong when I called this undemocratic, but this is even worse than how the process started. We are now being explicitly underrepresented in a fraudulent way. I mean, it's appalling.
I will say that the decision, so we discussed for about an hour and a half. It went back and forth. There were, we talked about at large, we talked about population statistics, we talked about electors, we talked about geography, community sense, the fact that LSDs have had no representation at all for a long time. we talked about sort of that LSD populations have had a loss of identity for a long time as well. So the decision ultimately was made based on some of the things that the mayor had said in his letter, and I'll say those now. Geographic concerns, historical concerns, community sense, population. We looked at that. We looked at electors, and this is what we came up with by consensus, and this is what Chad Peters took back to the government. I will say that I guess I want everybody to know from my part, because we have been under the impression that the government, and rightly so, that the government is going to do whatever they want to do, and they'll push whatever they want to push, and they'll make decisions where they see fit, whenever they see fit. When I went into this advisory committee meeting, I didn't know exactly what to expect, because other than a brief email from Mr. Peters about making a decision on boards and at large, I had no idea what to expect as far as conversation went, what the facilitator would be like, how he would run the meeting. I will say that he chaired or facilitated the meeting, but let the conversation flow. So he didn't have any particular system that he wanted to put on the town of Sackville or Entity 40, I guess. He just let the conversation go and sort of, I don't know, guided the conversation, and we sort of worked it out on our own, which I was pleasantly surprised about. But anyway, I just wanted to let everybody know that. Sabine, you're next.
Yeah, I mean, with all due respect, Andrew, but he doesn't have to currently tell you what to do, because he's got all the power. So that's not necessarily a good sign. That's just that he knows exactly what power he has. And so, you know, I'm as disappointed as Alison and as Bill, and I'm just barely holding it in, as you probably know. You know what I called this consensus, which is a fake consensus, because consensus should be based on really good evidence. And I think all of the councillors, we have received a letter today from one of the residents. It was pretty clear, and it really well represented what I think we all need to be very conscious of, that this is, you know, when I talked about an undemocratic process, done, we talked about this, but this is way beyond that. This is exactly what I feared would happen if we just go along with the process. So I hear what you're saying, that you had the meeting and it's a done deal, but it should not be a done deal. I mean, the idea of there being a rule of democratic representation by a population, and I've circulated that to all of council as well. There is a provincial rule. It's based in law, and the proposal that's currently on the table, being so absolutely skewed, is incredible, and it shouldn't be just taken. It's not something that Sackville should take just like that. And our role is to defend currently the assets and infrastructure and interests of the town itself, and they're definitely not being defended here. So, but that's one thing. I think I would like our two advisors to take this back for a revision. It's not going to fly in the long term. One of the questions that I had, and because I know this, you know, was just before the meeting, you answered most of them already that I had. One of the things that is really curious, at some point, somebody mentioned, you know, once a new council is in place, most of the things are going to be up to the new council. And I asked, and I'm hoping that we'll still be getting this, a legal opinion on the actual Local Governance Act, where it states that when a ward system is changed or the system of election is changed in a municipality, it has to stay in place for 4 years. So at some point, somebody, and I'm not sure, I think it was actually the facilitator or the government representative, who actually said that, you know, well, the new council can just change it. Well, it will not be as simple as that, but I'd like to have a legal opinion on this. And then again, you know, even at that point, you have to think about it, who has actually got the say in the new municipality. It's not where most of the population is. It's so skewed, right? If you have 1,200 individuals in one ward and 300 something in another, it's so skewed. And why would LSDs give up the power to make decisions on the assets, infrastructure, projects, and priorities of the new entity? So I think it sets it off a little bit it sets it off. I think it just continues on the wrong track. But I do think that you two should go back and ask that this be revised. The one thing I acknowledge that you did ask the question about at large or wards. And I think this is some of the things are like, I really, in principle, I don't care, but I suspect very much that an at large in Sackville would be better. Just because it would just be simpler, more straightforward, and you have less likely acclamation going on in the community. And when you look at current representation on council, and I'm not even sure I get this straight, but over half of current councillors, if I'm not wrong, are actually on this side of the highway and my side of the highway, if not more, I don't know. So, and that would mean that you may look really at acclamation downtown and in those three other wards, whatever it is, I forget the map. Some of the questions you answered already. I think, if I'm not wrong, Andrew, you said something about the 2021 StatScan numbers were used, but I don't think they were used because the numbers don't add up. I assume the 2021 election numbers were used. If you did talk about electors. Just to clarify that, the last provincial election numbers. Maybe that's what you meant by that? Because the StatScan number.
For the population, the 2021 census was used, and for the electors, from what we understand from Chad, from Mr. Peters, is that the 2020, the last election New Brunswick numbers, whatever year that was in, so the current ones were used for the electors.
Yeah. So that's clear. I mean, and then my last point was as well that, I mean, how can you base a ward system on an elector number instead of a population, since it's a representation by population idea, right? And that's, I mean, I don't know where that decision came from. I don't know if this is across the province the same thing, because I haven't heard what the other areas are doing. I also haven't asked about how that ward system is working in other areas. But it's a really weird approach, since the current 18-year-olds or 17, they have just as much a right to be represented as, especially at a municipal level. I would say it's really important. Anyway.
So the map that was sent might be slightly misleading because it shows electors on there. But as I said, the decision that was made by the advisory committee took into consideration many different factors like geography and history, and we did look at population numbers. We looked at electors as well. So Mr. Peters had chose to put electors on that map for whatever reason, but the ward system the ward lines that he had put just gave some idea about the number of electors within them. But the decision to have 4 and 4 was made not just on electors, just to clarify.
Yeah, no, and in many ways it's fair. It's fair that there should be representation from the LSDs. I'm not arguing with that, but you may have wanted to consider at least adding one more to Sackville, so it's less skewed. So there are other options that would make it just a tad bit less messy and less ugly than the way it is, and it would have been nice to for you to have brought sort of that consensus idea back and get some feedback before the final decision was made. That's how I envision at least that minimal kind of engagement that we can have to happen. Bring it back to us, have a conversation with us as council and say, so is this defensible? Is this defendable? Is this can we live? So put it that way, can we live with it? And I think that's the question. It's not so much, is it the ideal thing or what would be the perfect thing, but can we live with it? And this is one, as councillor, I would say, no, we can't live with it. It's just not appropriate. And so, I don't know what can be done. I know there's one question you asked for tonight. I've given my answer on that one.
And I saw some head nods that seemed to be in agreement. So unfortunately, because of the tight time constraints, the 15th, the advisory meeting that was on the 15th, was, oh, sorry. Or was it the 9th? No, sorry, yeah, the 15th. The advisory meeting that was on the 15th, the decision that was made at the end of that night had to be made. And that was the number of counselors and the mayor. And the ward divisions would be, that's not until March 11th. But the 4 and 4 that was decided that night by consensus is what it is. The government chose that date. The advisory committee meeting was on that date, and that decision that was made at the end of the night is now the decision. What we might have some leeway with are ward divisions. There will be some tweaking of the lines of the wards, of where they fall, you know, on a street, for example, one side of the street or the other. There may be some movements of the lines, possibly, but it's not going to be anything too much different than what's on that map. So what we do have some decision in currently is what we want to see for the Sackville, the 4 wards, or 3, 2, 1 ward councilors at large within Sackville. That's the decision, and what we have some opinion on at this point. Bruce, you had your hand up.
Yes, thanks, Andrew. I guess actually my opinion on the fact of whether at large or wards, I would like to see it in 4 wards. I'd like to see the number, see who's going to come out in those 4 wards to turn around and represent the people. I think it'd be kind of interesting to see exactly a real mix-up, as a matter of fact. In relation to the students being counted, I have never agreed that the students should be part of it. And the reason is because they're only citizens here for 4 years. And sometimes some of the decisions that are made by them can influence us for a very long time. We saw that in the provincial election when the students were allowed to vote. Actually, it's been said by many professors at the university, the only reason Megan got in was because of the fact that the students were allowed to vote. Now, that comes from experts, not me. So that's how I feel about it right now, and I think it'd be interesting to see exactly what does happen. Thank you.
Well, I guess everyone's allowed to have their opinion. If I move to a city, like if I move to a new place and I knew I was only going to live there for 4 years, and the decisions at a municipal level that might impact me directly the 4 years I lived there, I would feel that I would want to vote and that my vote counted. But you know, that's my opinion. I think that having the students come out to vote is a good thing, considering how involved the students are with the community of Sackville and the connection with the university to the town of Sackville. I think it's important that they vote and that their vote counts. But you know, everyone has their own opinion. But thanks, Bruce, for your input. Mike, you had your hand up.
Yes. First, I'd like to go back when the discussion was had around the table about the 4 and 4 and about the fact that we, you know, in Sackville had 67 or 68% of the population. How was that argument received as far as, okay, we understand, but we don't think we should? How did it go from, you know, saying we know you got the most population, but we think it should be equal? How did that conversation come around? Just curiosity for myself and for the public.
So you're asking how we came up with the decision of 4 and 4.
Right. I mean, I presume, now I don't know. I'm presuming that both you and Sean spoke in favor of the fact that we have 67% of the population. So what, you know, you might want to have more than 4 counselors from Sackville, not refusing to give representation to the other places because they deserve it and they need someone to speak for them. But to limit Sackville down to 4, how did that basically come around? Did anybody speak against having more for Sackville, or?
I guess first I'll say that remember that this decision has already been made. I guess
yes, I understand.
We'll make sure that that is known. I guess what I'll say is that there was an understanding that the LSDs need to have representation. We
Right.
briefly talked about, for my part, let me talk about me. I'm not going to talk about anyone else because although I do see, for example, Greg Martin is on the call tonight. I'm not going to talk for anyone else who was at that meeting, of course, but for my part, I spoke about how this is a lose-win, right? I mean, we are there in an advisory capacity to look at what is going to be the future of Entity 40, and yes, we are there to represent Sackville as well, which will be an integral part of that. Dorchester loses everything. They lose their mayor, they lose all their councillors. They will have one representative. Sackville loses 4 councillors. I mean, in this 4 and 4, in the fact that we have 8. Sackville loses 4 councillors, but they end up having half of the council seats in the new entity. Most likely, and I'm saying most likely, I can't see the future. Most likely, the mayor will also come from Sackville. That's my guess, just because of population and how things will go. We talked quite a bit we did talk about population. There was a conversation back and forth about where the line should fall. But there was a recognition that within the new entity to work together and have some sense of community within the new municipality, that there needed to be representation from the outlying areas that have not had it for a long, long time. As for more than 8 councillors, the facilitator felt that having any more than 8, there was a discussion of having more councillors, but getting a little too big. Even 8 councillors was too much, honestly. So having any more than 8 was starting to get unwieldy.
Okay, thanks for that. I appreciate that. And I agree with you. Everybody needs a representation, and I have no argument about, I don't think anybody here argues that point. So thank you for that clarity for myself and for the public. It's good to have that out. Part 2 of that, my opinion towards the wards, I think that because of the way that the people of Sackville are losing their voice towards the whole population. If we broke up in the wards, and then you would be eliminating certain people from trying to speak their mind to what they want out there, where the government is taking it and saying, no, okay, we know you have 6,900, but now we're going to break you down into 4 parts, pardon me, and then you can vote, which means you bring it down to one person voting for one section. And when we've had the experience before in town that when it was in wards, people would put their feet right in the mud and say, no, I'm not in favor of that. I'll never support that because you haven't done this for my region. And as I've said before, if you look at all the things we've accomplished in this town since we've gone into our present at-large system, it's all over the town. It's not just one area. I think you'd be hard pressed to find where somebody's ignored. So, and I've been in conversation with a lot of people. I've emailed different people to get their feedbacks, and I've only had, I've had 2, one coming from the same, or 2 coming from the same email in favor of wards. But I think with the government breaking down our votes like they are, limiting our capacity, I think staying either one ward for the whole town, with basically at large, gives people a chance to, everybody in town to have the chance to look for something positive for this town. So, and when I said before, there's like getting on a bus and, oh, they're taking us somewhere else. Now it's like, you get on that bus and we'll tell you where you get off, and not beforehand. So we've really changed the picture. So, thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Bruce, you still had your hand up. Was that just from your last comment? Okay, Mike's down. Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. I just wanted everybody to know I have a hard stop at 6:45 this evening, so I'll be jumping off at that point. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
You look like you're at the rink. Are you at the rink?
I am at the rink. Yeah, I'm jumping on the hockey bench in Riverview, so yeah, that's my life. So, I mean, the question at hand this evening is Sackville itself and what those four look like. When you add up the numbers that are on the map, you're getting 45-40. Equal divisions would be 1135. What's presented is close to that, 1240, 1160, 1170, 970. I mean, it seems like those four are spread out across the community pretty evenly. So I would probably throw my hat in the ring at saying that's the way that it should be, because we're going to get somebody from each area of town. And further to the point that we may be able to change it after, to Sabine's question and comment. If you look at the Local Governance Act, Section 46, I believe it's item 3 as you go down, there's an entry there where a council may make application to the minister to have that waived within the 4 years. So that would come back into power once Bill 82 goes out. So there is the possibility that it could be changed if desired after. That's my opinion, but anyway, we could ask for legal on that if we wish, but that was my interpretation, and that's my piece on the wards for Sackville. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Bill, go ahead.
Yeah, I just thought I thought I'd answer your question. I spoke last time, but I didn't answer your question. And we had at large before. We did that by choice. As Mike said, it's obvious to me why it's better. And so that's what I would support. If we're stuck with doing this, then it would be our 4 would come from Sackville. So it would be 1 ward with 4 representatives. First 4.
Okay. So Matt still has his hand up. Okay. Anyone else? Any other thoughts on at large or wards? I think everyone may have spoke. Allison and Ken, not to put you on the spot, but I don't know if you've actually, I saw you kind of head nod, but I don't know if you said anything. You don't have to say anything if you don't want to. But if you want to speak to it, you're more than welcome.
I could say that in an attempt to maintain some of the decisions that were made by Sackville Council before it becomes the larger entity council, that I think that we should stick with an at-large system within the old Sackville boundaries.
Okay. Ken, did you want to say anything? I don't mean to put you on the spot. If you don't want to, that's fine. But if you wanted to speak.
No, you're not putting me on the spot at all, Andrew. I would agree 100% with what Allison said there. Sackville, the existing Sackville as we know it, having that at a member at large system, I think works better. I understand the at-large system and the purposes of it, and so for the outer-lying areas, it makes perfect sense to me. Ideally, hopefully someday in the future, we get to a point where all of Entity 40 or whatever the new name may be, we get to an at-large system for everything. But I think at this point, the ward system on the outer-lying areas and the at-large system for existing Sackville boundaries makes perfect sense to me.
Okay. Thanks, Ken. Bill, you still had your hand up. Was that just from last time? Okay. And Bruce, I think you may have put your hand up again, or?
Yes, I did, Andrew.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
I just want a clarification. That wasn't just my opinion. That's from a number of people that I've spoken to. They just feel that actually if it was divided into the 4 wards, that we will get a number of people from all of those different areas instead of maybe having all the councillors all coming from 1 ward. And they think that it would be fair representation of the whole town as a whole. So That's why I think the way I do, as a matter of fact. It wasn't just my thinking. It comes from a number of people that I've spoken to. So anyway, I just want to clarify that. That's all. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Bruce. Sabine.
Yeah, I just have a very minor suggestion. Since it sounds like most councillors are in favor of the at large. Since the decision made on the 15th was a 4-4 decision, then I would suggest, and you would say the boundaries haven't been decided yet. So I think there is a justification for you to go back to the government rep and ask that those revisions to the boundaries are made so that at least those wards are somewhat more equal, that their differences are not quite as massive as that. They could be all around 500 or 600, and I think that would be more palatable, I guess. It's still not democratic representation, and it will not be until that system is changed again. But if it is what it is, then at least revise those boundaries to make it somewhat palatable, equal.
So sorry, Sabine, are you talking about the boundaries of all of the wards, or
No.
just
So,
Sackville?
No, okay, so you've got Sackville in the middle there, right? Which is suggested to be an at-large system, right? And then you've got the 4 wards, the surrounding wards, and those 4 wards that they're separated out in a different way than the way they are currently, where even they are at 3. There's one at 300, and then there's another one that's 800 or something. I forget. I don't have the map in front of me. Yep. But so at least they are more equal, because the reality is that this discrepancy will stay no matter what. If you guys supported that, that's on your shoulders. That's on you. But those Sackville Center having a lower representation, it is what it is. That's what you say. So then at least make the outside so it's like a pie. It's more like a pie than it is currently, where you've got these discrepant numbers. I'm talking about numbers, not the shape. Okay. So that's all I'm saying. I think that would be more palatable, at least to start out with. And like we're told, and maybe Matt is right, although I'm not a lawyer, he's not a lawyer, so I would still like to get a legal opinion how the new council will be able to change that, at what time. I'm assuming you get that at some point, which is great. But for now, at least it sets the stage for some sort of fairer representation than what we've received in the map. And that I think that should be doable.
Okay, thanks, Sabine. Thanks for that. Sorry, Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, just a quick one. When we get the, which I certainly hope we keep pushing for, the legal opinion, that it would be a written legal opinion, so that we know exactly where the law stands on it, instead of being told later that, oh, well, that's not exactly what we meant. I was just paraphrasing it, and I don't want the government working in that way. I'd like to trust them, but I'm being pushed to the limit right now. So thank you.
Well, for my part, I can't promise that, Mike. But that's something that we can ask and see. But I can't promise that, certainly. But we can see what the facilitator could say.
Yeah, well, I want you to bring it up and state the reason why, because we haven't got an answer back, and it'd be nice to have an answer back, so in a written form, so that we know where we stand. So that's all. Yep. Thank you.
All right. So I didn't really have anything else on the agenda. I guess that's what we were looking for tonight, and to have a conversation about. And so I guess that's it. If there's any last comments from any of the councillors. Erica.
Hi, folks. I'm not sure if you were taking questions from the public tonight or not.
Well, it's supposed to be a committee of council. Last time we had anticipated that we were going to have some public input, but if you have some questions pertaining to what we discussed tonight, then that's fine.
Okay, I guess I was curious if there was indeed a consensus with the advisory committee. I think you alluded to that, Andrew, but I just wanted to confirm that. Was there a consensus with that advisory committee about the distribution of representatives, or was there a minority opinion
No,
registered at that?
There was consensus.
Okay. And I was curious as to, I wonder if you could talk a bit about how the geography and history figured into the wards as we see them on the map.
Well, I guess historically, we talked about like geography is a big one, particularly with the Tantramar Marsh, which separates Point Dubuque from, let's say, Midgick and Cookville area. Also the geography of Westcock, British Settlement, Rockport, Dorchester Cape, and how cut off that is from the rest of Entity 40. We also talked briefly about Dorchester and possibly staying on its own or it being a part of Dorchester LSD. We also talked about sort of a sense of community, so what it meant to be part of the town of Sackville, the town of the village of Dorchester, or being in sort of a farming community. So there was that. Historically, again, we talked about those areas like Point Dubuque, Allac, Jollicoeur being historically, and I would say they should be proud of this, but represented in sort of an LSD advisory capacity for many, many years. Westcock, British Settlement, and Rockport area having a sense of history that is connected to Sackville, but somewhat removed. Same thing with the village of Dorchester, again, being somewhat connected to Sackville, but also removed. So, there was a lot of conversation around those pieces. I hope that explains that.
Yeah, that helps certainly, yeah. One more question. I'm just curious as to why parts of the town of Sackville have been carved off in those wards.
Yes, and I asked that question as well, particularly around Fairfield, Ridgewood Drive, Hessler, part of King Street, like the Frosty Hollow area going out that way. They were cut off and added to the ward that would be the southern part of the Sackville LSD. So I had asked that question, and for me, especially an area like Ridgewood, Hessler, part of Fairfield, part of King Street is definitely a lot closer to Sackville, and the argument could be made that they are, and I don't mean to do an us versus them thing, but they are more Sackville than they would be more LSD or a rural area. And so I asked that question, and some of the lines, which are not entirely set yet, there may be some movement in there. Some of the lines were drafted by service as well, so level of service. So if there's water and sewage that goes out to that area, sometimes, so they might have brought the lines in to around service levels. So I had approached that. I thought that maybe like that chunk of Fairfield and Ridgewood Drive and part of King Street should maybe be included in that Sackville ward that was down there. But again, those lines, the lines haven't been solidified yet, so there will still be a few changes once they map out the finer details of the lines.
Okay, thank you very much.
So I guess that's it. I guess the other thing I'll say is we do have another advisory committee meeting set for March 3rd, and that's where we'll take back what we heard tonight to the advisory committee and to the transition facilitator. And based on what we talk about there, we may get an opportunity to look at some sort of finer details of the lines. The lines are, like I said, are pretty much set, but there is room for us to be able to talk about where the ward lines fall. So we'll have a conversation again March 3rd. The date for, like, the final date for the ward lines to be set is March 11th. So that date has been pushed from the last date we heard, which I think was March 4th. So we still have some time to talk about the ward boundaries. So just so everybody's aware.
Andrew, can I add a comment?
Sure.
Just about what Erica had asked and your response to her question. If they are looking, or if they're considering running the boundaries along services that people currently have or do not have, they could potentially be playing a little bit of a dangerous game there, because there are Sackville residents that have been paying Sackville taxes for a good many years, that don't have, let's say, the same level of services as someone that's more downtown, let's say. So, I would urge you and the mayor to pay particular attention to that, and urge them that they may want to look at that more closely. I'm one of the individuals that live in Frosty Hollow, and I'm certainly not looking, I guess I don't want to say I'm speaking for people in Frosty Hollow or anything like that, but for people in Sackville in general, looking at making any kind of separations based on services that you did receive or didn't. It's just, it doesn't sit well with me, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that feels that way.
So I guess maybe I should, let me slow down and clarify. I asked that question of why that was cut off because it's highly noticeable, right? That piece of land, the line that comes in, like I said, it's Ridgewood, right? Hessler, King Street, Frosty Hollow, right? And that's all added to that southern piece of the Sackville LSD. And his answer was that they looked at service levels. Some people who had service and some people who didn't. Now, I did get the impression that maybe that was just what he was being told by the mapping service that they have through this transition process. But part of it too is that they were trying to get the number of that ward within the southern part of the LSD to be a little higher. So they were, hacking off a part of Sackville. I don't know if you noticed, but on Crosman Road too, the line comes down and then it cuts over and takes a house and then cuts back and then goes back down again. So, the lines are really not, they're not set. There are some details that need to be worked out, and that is probably one that's going to come up. So just so you know, that part is not set in stone, and there'll be something for us to talk about.
Yeah, well, I think getting back, the running the lines based on service shouldn't come into the equation whatsoever. It would make perhaps more sense to run the lines for the existing Sackville area based on current taxation, perhaps, but based on services. You're looking at people that have been in Sackville for, I don't know how many years now, but for however many years, and now perhaps, let's say, losing a little bit of representation at the municipal level. They're just asking for a lot of trouble, which I think they're asking for trouble anyway. But anyway, that's my piece.
Fair enough. Erica had her hand up. Was that from before? I see you still on the list. So
No, and it's a very quick one. When they said services, are they talking about water and sewer? Are they talking about sidewalks? What are they talking about?
They didn't specify, but I would assume that they're talking about water and sewer. I'm assuming he didn't say
Okay.
specifically.
And water and sewer is a totally different rate, is it not?
Yeah,
Or should,
yes.
okay, all right, thanks.
Water and sewer doesn't come from property tax. Water and sewer is from fees. So if you're not, yeah.
Yeah, completely separate.
Sabine, you had your hand up next, I see on my list.
Yeah. Sorry about that. And this is just a note, just a highlight. That's when you don't have engagement and don't have proper conversations around these topics, you get really shitty decisions. And that's what this is. And I'm glad we're not in council chambers because it's got to be called out for what it is. And I would also say, Andrew, that we can't direct you because that's not our role here. You're asking for input, but if we were in council chambers, I would put a motion forward to direct you to go back to the advisory committee in a certain way and ask for things, because this is, to me, this is. It is what we knew was going to happen. It is even worse, actually, what I thought, because it makes no sense. And when things don't make sense, they turn out to be what Ken said. It's a mess. It will go bad, and the new council will be loaded with a mess that they have to clean up, which will take years to clean up. So I'm still going back to encouraging to push for those changes that can be made to clean up this mess before it actually happens. And I'm being very gentle and nice right now, but I really mean it. This is your job. This is your job as councillors and as mayor. Sorry, you're both there. So. But thanks.
Thanks, Sabine. I would argue that no matter what happens, it's going to be a mess for the next 5 to 10 years, no matter what decision was made. But I take your point. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, it's basically going on the same line what Sabine and Ken were talking about. I'd like to see you go back and say, can you stop sort of like mucking with our outer boundaries for people who are within the municipality? Put those lines back up, put the house back in. And it's almost like gerrymandering, you don't play with figures, because we know that figures lie and liars can figure. So, and when you see those things happening, you got to wonder what the heck's going on. And if you're looking for trust from a government, then, step back a little bit and get back into the norm. And otherwise, if you, I think they're going into a mess. I think the government's going to create something, as Bruce Finney said quite a while, 2 councils ago, that is going to come back to bite them. It's going to be such a mess. Now, whether it bites them in the polls or where, I don't know, but it's going to bite them bad for the mess coming. So I think fighting for those boundaries back, they're going to put the wards out there like they want anyway. So don't play with the figures and leave the boundaries alone, at least. Thank you.
So, yeah. So once again, this is what we're discussing. We are discussing boundaries. The boundaries have to be set by March 11th. So,
right.
Point taken.
Oh, okay. Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Sean, you're next on the list. I see your hand there.
Great, thanks. I thought I saw another hand up. I was going to let all council kind of have their opportunity there, Andrew.
Allison's hand is up if you want her to speak before you, but that's up to you.
Yeah, no, I mean, she can go ahead. I'm just wanting to hear what council what their thoughts are and things.
Allison, I know your Wi-Fi is terrible, but do you want to try to say something? You could turn your video off. That might help. She put her hand down. Maybe she got kicked again. All right. Well, Sean, go ahead.
Great. Thanks, Andrew. I just want to reiterate what Andrew was saying in regards to the discussion on these boundaries. And it wasn't just Andrew or us that kind of raised the fact of where those lines were. I mean, others around that table were talking about that as well. So, that's definitely something that we can take back and have that type of discussion to ensure that we are looking at this and that it's not just based on service or sidewalks or curb or gutter or whatever it might be, so that we have that type of discussion around that table, ensure that that message is clear. I just want to thank council for actually taking the time to provide some very clear understanding to myself and Andrew in regards to what your particular feelings are on how Sackville should be laid out in regards to wards, and also in regards to some things that you were looking for us to take back as well. And we'll do our best to get those answers for you and get them back. And I appreciate the candor, and I appreciate the direct questions, and it really gives us something to work with. So thank you very much.
Can you hear me now?
Thanks, Sean. Oh, yes. Yes, Allison.
Okay, I'm going to try to speak quickly. I just want to say that I feel like Sean and Andrew, Deputy Mayor Black and Mayor Michaud are in a very particularly difficult role. I think that they're trying to straddle this forced amalgamation in a way that will hopefully mean good things for everyone and also for Sackville. So I know that your hands are tied a lot of the time, and I'd just like to say that I appreciate that you're stepping up and attempting something, even though I think a lot of times it's just a facade for the government, for the provincial government.
Thanks for that, Allison. And we, like I said, we have an opportunity with the boundary lines not being, not having to be set until March 11th for us to have another conversation. So we, like I said, we have our meeting coming up on March 3rd. This meeting is recorded. I'm under the impression that Mr. Peters has been watching all of our council meetings and listening to everything that we've been talking about. So I'm sure that he'll listen to this one too, but we'll be able to bring up the points that were raised tonight. Any last comments? If not, we can call it a night. And we're 2 minutes shy of our hour.
Thanks, Andrew.
Okay. All right. Thanks, guys.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Sean.
Good night, guys.
Good
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.